guest this evening is Stevie Ray, corporate speaker and trainer across the country for over 25 years and a co-founder of Stevie Ray's Improv Company in Minneapolis. He's a nationally syndicated columnist for the Business Journal newspapers and is author of 9 books, including Quick Thinking for Any Situation, The Calm Before the Brainstorm, and Speaking in Public Without Sweating in Private. His books have been read by nearly every member of his family. In addition to his work in the corporate world, Stevie is a professional entertainer, has performed with such stars as Paula Poundstone and Weird Al Yankovic. He's also a beekeeper, volunteers by recording books on tape for the blind. He has studied 7 martial arts and holds a black belt in 4 of them. At one point in his career, he was actually the bodyguard for Pee Wee Herman. Please help me welcome Stevie Ray.
Hi, everybody. Mr. Fallon, wasn't that a fabulous job? It's not easy to get up here and give the introduction. Yes. So, what we're going to do this evening, we are going to spend some time. I have you till about 10 o'clock. I do that to see who the Lutherans are, because they're the ones going, okay, we'll sit here. It's a religion. We're going to, did you do the wall, the rappelling? You were beside me.
Yep.
Yes, yeah, we did the double dog dare beside each other. He started probably 3 minutes before I went, and I beat him to the bottom. And he came over to express how impressed he was. And I said, no, it was fear. My hand was like going as fast down that rope as I could. I actually was telling myself, slow down, slow down. But whatever came through here didn't get to my hand. It just said, no, speed up, speed up. So that was something we don't ever have to do again. What I do is I spend most of my time as a corporate trainer and a keynote speaker. And as Dennis mentioned, I run Stevie Ray's Improv Company. How many of you have seen the TV show Whose Line Is It Anyway? That's improv. That's what my company does. But there are 2 parts to improv, and most people are only familiar with the performing side, what you see on TV or in a comedy club. And improv is different than stand-up comedy in that stand-up is a solo performer delivering prepared material, but improv is a troupe of people getting ideas from the audience and making it up on the spot. Well, a lot of people don't know that the training side of it actually came first, many decades ago, in helping people to think on their feet and communicate better. And later it was turned into a performance art. So I spend, my company does the entertainment side, and we have our performance company performs at our cabaret, which is now out at the Chanhassen Dinner Theaters. They're under new ownership, and we've partnered with them for many years. So that became our permanent home some time ago. But I spend most of my time helping people do what we're going to do tonight, deliver presentations more effectively. Now, one of the things about the Family Friends with Scouting and the presentations that have been done up to this point is, as a volunteer for the Northern Star Council, I was asked to examine it. And there are a lot of, there's a lot of research into the art of persuasion and what actually gets people to act in a way you want them to. Many presentations do the opposite. And if you've ever been in an audience where somebody's been trying to get you to do something, you have felt this. If you don't present information in exactly the right way, the brain automatically sets up resistance. And a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about tonight is actually based on research into neuroscience. Because if you understand the wiring of the brain, you understand how it's triggered to respond. And when you give a presentation and you're asking and making an ask, you are either going to trigger the listeners in the room to respond well, or you're going to trigger them to resist, and then you get the pleasure of standing in front of a room full of people who just stare at you. And have you been there? Yeah, where you're kind of going through the presentation or you're making the ask, and you see this look, this kind of nod. What does this kind of nod mean? Yeah, it means this. Yeah, this means I'm not with you, I don't agree with you, but I'm going to nod. Why do people nod when they don't agree with you?
Because they acknowledge what you say, not they agree.
They're acknowledging what you're saying for one purpose. to get this over with. Basically, we nod to hurry people along, which is only one kind of nod. The good nod also occurs, and that's more of a head jerk. You see this? Oh, that's a realization or an agreement, and something sparked. That is when people are with you, and that's when you get the good vibes. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the process we've put together, and it will be different from what you might have done before because it's structured in a way to make it easier for you. It might be unfamiliar, and that's good because that keeps us all on our toes. So let's just start. We're not going to go through this piece by piece, and you'll notice that I have this is the only handout, and this is a manual for you to take with you. We have no PowerPoint, we have no AV or any of that kind of thing, because people really like PowerPoint, don't they? Yeah, that was called a lie. So we're just going to go through this bit by bit, and this is going to be an open-ended discussion, not me presenting to you. We're going to talk about this stuff. I want to know how you feel about what we go through, and where you might feel a little uncomfortable with some of this stuff, or where you might think this is off in its mark. And then I'll tell you you're wrong, and we'll just move on. So let's get started. The most important thing, first of all, is what Dennis did, is to make the introduction. People often make up their mind before you open their mouth. Well, frankly, most of the time they do. They will make up their mind before you open your mouth because there is a process in the human brain, and it's called the approach-withdraw response. The approach-withdraw response happens the minute somebody gets up to speak to you or the minute you meet somebody brand new. It doesn't happen with familiar people because we've already read them and we're familiar. But some unfamiliar situation, the approach-withdraw response is the part of the brain that decides safe, unsafe, agree, disagree. It happens instantly, it's subconscious, and it happens all day long whenever we meet somebody. It's a basic default function of the brain. We're doing it all the time. So when I'm like, we haven't really met, right? So hi, I'm Steve, and you are Mike. Right now, both our brains are thinking, all right, do I want this guy in my life or not? Safe, unsafe. Good for me, not good for me. Guess how long it takes for that to process?
2 microseconds.
5 milliseconds. Yes, you're right. 5 milliseconds. Doesn't that suck to know? It's over before you start. Why? Because the visual cortex of the brain evolved first. It's more powerful than the auditory cortex, which means no matter what you say, it's not going to outdo what I see. So when you walk up here, I've made my mind up to decide whether to agree with you and go along with you. And a lot of times we talk ourselves out of that gut reaction. You ever meet somebody and you had that kind of oogie feeling about them, but you couldn't put your finger on why, so you dated them anyway? She laughed right away. Women laugh first at that question. Then 6 months later, I knew there was something wrong with that guy. The introduction helps smooth that out. The reason my introduction was read the way it was is that it was very carefully crafted over a long period of time of me collaborating with colleagues, of me telling them everything about myself, from personal, professional, everything, and then I said, what of that would interest you if I was going to present in a professional setting? And I took a conglomeration of every response that I got, and pretty much they were all the same. You got a bit of professional information, because we have to have a valid reason for listening to you. Then we've got to have some personal information to make you human. There's a little laugh built in there, and there's kind of a reason why we're here. Even though it's not in the introduction, you kind of know who I am as a result. The introduction is key. You'll notice on page 4, step 3, I include, please read the introduction as written and avoid paraphrasing. Whoever is going to introduce you, it might feel a little pushy to tell them that, and you have to. Because here is what I get every time. Somebody reads my introduction, they get to one part of it, the audience reacts. Either with a, oh, I never knew that, or a laugh. They will always say, he told me to say that. Or, I have to say it, it's written here. It completely destroys your validity at that point to have someone say that. So, you don't have to be pushy about it, but I do tell people, look, it can be a little uncomfortable, so you might want to throw in a few things. Make it easy on yourself. Just read it right off the page. And that way you're giving them permission to just relax and read it off. Okay? So the introduction is the first step. What we want to do now is do a little brainstorming for you. Let's have you two work together, and you two, and you two, and you two, and you three. Okay?
Oh, really? Because I already know these guys.
Boy, she's going to be fun. She already wants to trade. The rest of everybody's going, well, we know them too, and we don't want to work with them. That's why we put you with three, because they're the buffer. All right. I'd like you to talk to your new friend here, and I want you to tell them everything about yourself and say, here's where I grew up, here's what I like to do for fun, here's what I do professionally, here are some things that are notable about me. It might feel like you're bragging. Go ahead and brag. People love it when you are proud of yourself because it gives them permission to be proud of themselves as well. And then include one thing. In that conversation, say one thing you're pretty sure would surprise your friend to learn about you. Okay? Take a minute or two and do
That's something that I would expect.
We're writing down. Go ahead and take a few minutes to write down what we're about to do. Okay? Your name, sir?
Jacob.
Can you tell us a few things about your partner? Just tell the group what you learned. And I want you to react and say, ooh, write that down. And if a majority of the group says, ooh, write that down, we're right.
Oh my.
If only one, yes, this is going to be a lot of pressure, you know. And if quite honestly, people say, no, that one doesn't really trip my trigger, then you can leave it off. Because this is really personal. It's more about, we're all really here to help each other professionally. So this is a good feedback time. So go ahead and tell us what you learned.
Well, this is Hayden Troy. He works for the Boy Scouts as our community relations for Three Rivers and Northern Lights. And he grew up in Minnetonka, the Minnetonka area in Troop 424, where he earned his Eagle Scout a number of years ago. And he's been working for the Boy Scouts for 3 years now, or starting his third year now. He's done some traveling in his life. I didn't catch where to.
Where have you traveled?
Greece, Italy, Mexico, Spain, a few other places in Europe.
So,
Okay, keep going.
right. And then he's an avid runner when he is not working. That's his favorite thing to do.
Okay. Comment.
I like that he grew up locally, local troop, do the troop number.
He's familiar then.
Yes.
That gives him a... He's
So
one
it
of
gave me a
us.
reference,
Yes.
It's over that way.
Well, that's what most Minnesotans are like. Minnetonka, I heard of that.
Yeah.
That's all we need. I heard of it. That's why new restaurants have a difficult time in Minnesota, because we haven't heard of that yet. We wait for all of our friends to go first, and then we'll go. Because, you know, if it's not good, we always got Perkins, because we know that. So,
So
go
I like
ahead.
that, and professional experience with scouting, the 3 years, that caught my ear.
Anybody else? What else did you catch?
I thought the travel was interesting where he's been.
Because when you hear travel, you normally think of the common places, but when you threw out Greece, that sounds kind of exotic
Yeah, it
to most
wasn't
people.
Ely.
What's that?
It wasn't Ely.
Yeah. My lovely wife is originally from Chicago, and when we got married, she moved here instead of me moving there, because I'm a Minnesotan. I'm not moving away. Are you kidding me? So when she moved here, I had to explain to her what the names are for all of our cities, because she asked me, "Oh, you're going up to Duluth." I said, "No, that's Duluth. There's no Duluth, but it's spelled Duluth." And Eli was the other city. So.
I like that he's an avid runner.
Yes.
He takes care of himself. He's
Would you normally think that that was interesting to other people?
Yeah.
Okay, because he's full of himself. Well, yeah. Well, that's good. Did you write those down?
I did.
Okay. What's one thing that would surprise us to learn about you? Or that you're pretty sure we don't know? For those of you, for all of us that know you.
Born in Texas.
Wow, I totally did not hear that in your voice.
Born in Texas, grew up in Minnetonka. Okay. That adds just a little something. And it doesn't have to be groundbreaking big stuff. It just makes you more human. How many of you have been at a conference or a business thing where the person being introduced, there's just no life to it at all? All you get is a resume. And we don't need just that. We need something a little bit more human. Okay? What about your friend?
Haven't gotten that far.
Okay.
We just know that.
And what
Same with
I,
us.
what's that?
Same with us.
Same with you. Yeah, and we don't have a lot of time, which is why we're shortening this quite a bit. So I apologize if it feels like we might be rushing you. We're going to try to fit in as much as we can with the time we have. We're going to learn more from tonight that you can take away and work on. So if you don't complete this, don't expect to. We're using these people as guinea pigs.
It was cool to get to know him.
Yeah. And what did you learn about this guy?
Well, he likes motorcycles, that's a big one for me.
Okay.
From northwestern Minnesota, which is very unique as well, that he's been in Scouts for a long, long time. He has 2 Eagle Scouts, and one thing that was really cool, been married for 39 years. That's quite a milestone.
It is, for her.
He's in this.
She gets an award.
That's older than most of these district executives.
I like that his career, he's in the sciences, computer science, and that he's stayed at his job for a long period of time, twice long stints, but then last year took a year sabbatical. I like that. But he's back at it.
It was forced sabbatical, but a great one.
You don't have to say that.
Well, these are things that make people human. I've got a friend who speaks he's in the healthcare technology. So it's what's the word I'm looking for, where they make the machines? Biomed. And he calls himself a refugee from corporate America because he's been fired from more jobs than anybody he knows. And he's happy about it.
Huh?
So it gives you permission to be okay with it. So,
One last thing I'd
Yes.
like to say is that he reminded me that Sandy and I taught a class at University of Scouting, and he was in the class, so it kind of sparked a thought, and I remembered him. And I remembered that he was sitting right in the center, and he was really knowledgeable, and he was really good. And then I also said, and what was really cool about that class was the 2 women sitting up in front smiled and reacted with us the whole time. It was just an awesome experience.
and that's what makes it
Really-
hard when you get people who don't do that.
Right.
So one of the things we'll kind of wrap up the introduction part of it with, if you feel a little awkward bragging about yourself, you have to just kind of get over that. And if you have awards or you have honors that have been given to you or recognitions, you've got to have them. I did not want to include a lot of what I have in my introduction, and other people kind of coached me because I'm a member of the National Speakers Association, and these are all professional speakers. And they all said, you got to get over yourself. This is not for your benefit. This is for theirs. People want to be impressed with whoever is in front of them, and they can't do that unless you tell them who you are. So note what is noteworthy about you and put together an introduction. Mine is just an example, but it follows a flow of professional accomplishments, human stuff, ends on a surprise. And that gets you on. Yes, ma'am?
Is there an optimum length of time that an introduction should take, and does that depend on what the occasion is?
That's a very good question. There is no real optimum length other than say it and get it done. Mine is about as long as I would ever want it to be. And do not let, and this is a warning, if you're going to show up someplace and you're going to represent the council, don't let somebody say, well, I've taken care of your introduction. Because that happens sometimes. I mean, for me, I've had people say, well, I looked you up on the internet, I've got some stuff about you. Oh my God, they rambled on for like 5 minutes about everything I've ever eaten for lunch. And if you don't craft it, it's not crafted. So say, no, I got it for you, don't worry, right here. So have it about no longer than what I've got. But don't worry about talking about yourself. Questions, comments? Yes?
So yours, you've got your professional, because this is a scouting setting, would you say professional equals scouting?
Both.
Okay,
Who you are outside of scouting is just as important.
okay.
Because if you hold a very good position in a company or whatever, you've got to know that you're more than just standing here representing scouting. Because we're adding some kind of authenticity to you and authority. The fact that you've traveled gives you some sense of authority because you're a worldly guy now. Much more than we would have thought if we just didn't know anything about you. Okay? Good question. Anything else? So go home and craft your introduction, share it with some people, and trust their response. Because we will usually say, no, I don't want to brag on myself. Let them tell you what to say. All right? Let's jump ahead. One of the things that is key is this is a persuasive argument you're making. Most people approach persuasion the wrong way simply because we're not taught how to persuade. We react to persuade. So let's play a little game. I want you to turn to the person that you just worked with and pick person A and person B with you and your partner.
A for Alexander. All right. You got that right.
That's not the whole exercise. Next week we work on the rest of the alphabet. We didn't want to push it.
In that case, you're Z.
In that case, you're Z and we're working backwards. Person A, I want you to convince person B to do something. And I want you to pick something you're pretty sure they don't want to do. Like ride a bike to work all winter with no coat on, shave their head bald, whatever. Just pick something really difficult and try to persuade them to do it. I'm going to give you just like 30 seconds to take a shot. Go.
It doesn't matter, so.
Okay. Who was doing the convincing here? You were, and your name?
Andy,
And you were trying to convince her to do what?
get a pig instead of a dog.
Get a pig instead of a dog. Okay. Which is fun. I have a 12-year-old stepdaughter who's going on 30, and she wants a pig. And boy, the answer is no for that one. So how did you try to convince her?
She's very fond of her 2 cats right now, so I argued on their behalf they would appreciate a pig more than a dog.
Well, that's kind of a stretch, isn't it? But that's good. That's creative. That's very creative. Now, what kind of nod were you getting? It's Nicole, right? What kind of nod were you getting from Nicole? What's that nod look like? No. Here's how most people persuade, and there are 2 approaches to persuading anybody to do anything. Whether it's standing in front of a group like this, or me and my brother talking about which restaurant to go to. It all comes down to one of the 2 approaches. Approach number 1 is conclusion first, evidence afterwards, which is, here's what I want you to do, and here's why. We almost always use that approach by saying, here's what I want, now here's why. The conclusion coming first only works in one instance, and that's when you're absolutely sure the other person already agrees with you. That's the way political conventions and high school pep rallies are structured, because they already know everybody's there because they're on the same page. So a high school pep rally is, hey, we got the best school in the world, right? Yes. The conclusion comes at the beginning, then they give all the reasons. Oh, we got the best football team, the best hockey team, the best teachers, whatever. They follow it. Same with political. Here's our candidate. Yay! Now here's why our candidate's the best. If you're not sure of how people fully feel about what you're going to say, or you know they're against it, you have to reverse the order. You've got to get them to say a number of yeses that lead up to the conclusion. A lot of times, like when you're making an ask for scouting, we say, we need you to support scouting. Now let me tell you why scouting is really important. That's when you lose them. Sometimes we've actually seen it where people who were with you prior to that turn. And it's not because they believe differently, it's because a trigger goes off in the brain whenever you tell somebody conclusion first, unless they're so in agreement with you. Now, your audience will be in agreement that scouting is important. What they're not necessarily in agreement is give more money, or give any money at all. Because what's the biggest argument against giving at that moment? From the audience you'll have. One is, we already give. That's the most common, right? What else might they say? If they don't say it out loud, they're thinking,
It's the wrong time of year.
Wrong time of year.
oh yeah, now you're asking? You know, this couldn't happen in June when we got nothing else going on? Those are the silent things you can't deal with right off the bat, so you gotta get them out of the way silently before they actually say them. So you gotta get some yeses first. And the funny thing about it, it's the psychology of yesing in the brain, is as long as they say yes a number of times, when the end result comes, it's very difficult to say no. This is frankly why we buy cars that we didn't intend to buy. Because a lot of people go into a dealership saying, okay, honey, we're not buying today, we're just looking. And they come out holding keys. And that's because salespeople are taught this psychology and they use it against our interest. So we're trying to use it obviously for a good outcome. So, you know, giving to something good, all right? I hope nobody sells cars, you know, I just made friends. Actually, about a week ago, I did have somebody in one of my corporate workshops who was a car salesperson her whole career and had just shifted to the company I was talking to. And she said, oh no, you're right. We're taught this stuff. Why do you think we sell? You know? So that's what gets us to step number 4. You got to get people to say yes to something. They don't say yes to the end result. They just say yes to anything to start. So the cool thing is to surprise them. And we say, look around the room. How many volunteers do you think run scouting? 42%, 83, 99, 68. And if you can get people to be a little surprised by the actual number, that causes them to listen a little bit more. Surprises help you make your final ask. And the reason the in parentheses, nod, yes, clap, the nod is important. People agree when they nod their head. There's a new bit of research that shows, we used to think the brain was a computer up on top of the head that controlled everything. We've discovered now that it's two-way in a remarkable fashion, is that the brain decides what to think based on muscle movement. Yeah, it's really cool. Try this. A psychologist taught me this once. Next time you're really pissed off, smile in the middle of your anger, and you cannot remain angry. Because the muscles are telling the brain, you're happy now, look what you're doing with your mouth. I tried it, I thought it was bogus. But I said, okay, I'll give it a try. The next time, because I said to the guy, of course I'm still going to be mad. The reason for my anger is still there. She's 12. But I was really upset once. I thought, okay. I went, crap, now I'm happy. I wanted to stay mad. So.
I do it all the time, Lauren.
Do you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. When I'm on the phone with, when I'm on the phone doing customer service, I'm always smiling because not only does it improve my mood, but people on the other end of the phone can hear it.
That's what you're taught. The smile can be heard.
Yep. And then
Because the tone of your voice changes.
I work in shipping and receiving, so when drivers come out of the dock, it's always a smile and what can I do for you? What'd you bring me today?
Mm-hmm.
What did you bring me?
So when you're in a live environment, what you want is agreement. What signals agreement? A nod of the head. So when the head nods, the brain agrees. Now it does go the other way too. If I agree with you, I nod in response. If you get me to nod, I will then agree with you. And what you're empowering is something called a mirror neuron. Mirror neurons are the part of the brain that cause us to mirror physically what the other person's doing. We're a social creature, so we generally mirror, like these 3 guys. Look, 4 guys, right, all leaning back with some kind of cross going on here. And now you. So if you nod your head, imperceptibly, you just nodded your head. Did you know it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of people in a workshop go, okay, I'm not going to do that. But if you keep your body moving in the right direction by nodding every now and then, that will cause a reaction in the brain to get them to move on that yes train that we're after. Okay? So that's why that nod in there is very important. Grabbing the attention of the room. This follows basically the entire structure that you will see on the cover. Number 4, number 5, that kind of thing. There is a construct to persuasion. And if you don't do it in 5 easy steps, the person listening is not persuaded. And the 5 steps are starting with what's called the hook. What's going to hook them? That's why starting with the ask, well, we're here to support scouting, doesn't hook anybody, because it doesn't really grab you, does it? The easiest way to grab anybody's attention is to go to number 4 and number 5 go together. A story. Stories hook people because we cannot stop listening to a story till we hear the end. You ever watched an entire hour of the crappiest TV show ever because you had to see how it ended? Yes, it's called The Bachelor. So, you have to have a good story because a story is more persuasive than any statistic you can ever give. In fact, studies were done comparing a story told by itself, stats and figures by themselves supporting the thing, or a story backed up with facts and figures. And the most persuasive of all 3 was just the story by itself. Because as soon as you start overloading us with too much information, we don't buy it. So you have to have a story that's going to grab their attention and make your case. The story has to be something that carries the message itself. This is where people make often the biggest mistake, in what kind of story they tell. The example that's given here is on page 5. One summer at Many Point, we had a sailing group activity. If you look at that story, you'll see a very nice structure there. 3 first-year scouts. So we have an image of John, Dylan, and Sean. We get a picture in our head. We see the problem with their experience. None of them have been in a sailboat before. And then they were just turned loose. They were apprehensive. We start to feel a little apprehension about what's going to happen to these 3 little boys that we just met. Then the story ends up okay. And we connect that with the scouting experience. Here's a bad story. And I'm not using anybody's, I'm just making one up right off the top of my head. Hi, my name's Stevie Ray, and I've been a Boy Scout. I was a scout when I was younger, and I got a lot out of it. And I actually grew up in Rochester, Minnesota, where I was a scout. And one day we were out, and I was with our scoutmaster and a small group of kids, and we really learned how to get along from that experience. Because some of us didn't get along, but we got along after that. So scouting is really important. Now, what do you feel is wrong with that story?
That you don't know how to talk.
Yes, first of all. But what else is wrong with the story just in itself? What's it missing?
Some details.
Yeah, you're not really living it, are you?
There's no heart.
There's no heart. There's no details. And that's where it's tricky. You have just enough detail, and then you got too much. You know, we've all had one of those kind of moments where you want to say, that detail didn't need to be included. What else is missing? What's the lesson? Not really. It's got to be very specific. And here's a good story. A story that happens to a person, and as a result of that thing happening, a lesson was learned and a life was improved in a specific way. Notice how I had no specifics about what really happened in my story. Now I can pull one from reality and say, okay, when I was and now I'll tell you a true story. My scout troop was 110 to 120 boys strong. Yeah, it was crazy. We were a moving army. And so we had between 10 and 12 patrols, and each one had 10 kids in it. So when you were a patrol leader, you had an assistant patrol leader, and then you had a junior assistant scoutmaster and senior patrol leader, and it was a structure. And it was meant to help us learn how to get along in a big environment like that. And I was a patrol leader. And one of my kids, Bill Barton, I didn't like Bill. Bill was one of those kids you didn't want in your patrol. And there's nothing wrong with him, there's something wrong with us. You know, it's just oil and water, we didn't get along. So I went up to my scoutmaster and I said, sir, can I have Bill transferred to another patrol? Because he's a problem. And he said, well, what's wrong? Well, he doesn't do this, and he doesn't do that, and he's never on time, and he doesn't get his badges, so it holds our whole patrol back, because we had patrol of the year. I don't know if anybody else does that, but we had, our patrol of the year got to go to the boundary waters, you know, all that cool stuff. So it was fight or go. And he said, okay, there's going to be people in your life who bug you, and you're going to blame them for you not achieving. That's not how the way life works. So I'm leaving Bill in your patrol. You're the patrol leader. Your job is to make it work. That's your job. Make it work. So I was stuck with Bill. I had him over to my house for some sleepovers so we could get to know each other better. We didn't become best friends, but we made it work. And to this day, in any work environment that I'm in, I now know that if I don't get along with somebody, that's called life, and we make it work. And I don't blame that other person for being who they are. Now, that's a personal story of mine. What would have made it even better is if I could tell it about somebody else that we could all identify with. Your story can be personal and it can be about you. It's usually better if it's about somebody we can identify with who's not you. So this might take you out of stories you've already told. This is a little bit different way of approaching it. But the story is the key to the whole thing. And if you don't have a story to tell, it's not compelling. So I want you to take a few minutes, and without talking to your partner, I want you to think about a kid that you know who had an experience specifically that resulted in a lesson and a life that was improved. Okay? Just take a few minutes and think about that. Who has a really clear idea of what they would use as a story? You got a clear one? Okay. Okay, since she said to go to you, we'll go to you. What would you use?
Scout in the troop, Life Scout, and leaders going to Philmont for leader training. And in that capacity, a leader can bring their own children, but they can also bring one or two, up to a certain number of scouts to come along as well and participate in a week-long program that leaders' children can participate. Mountain Man track. It's only a 6-day track versus the normal 10-day track. At any rate, that I was a leader, one of the leaders who went for training, and there was one boy in particular. There were two boys from our troop who went in that capacity. And this boy was not my son, but another boy. He was a Life Scout. He went on the Mountain Man track. He was mostly a quiet boy, but he was slowly progressing towards his ranks. His parents happened to be the ones who picked us up at the airport when we got home. The kid never stopped talking. He was a kid who hardly ever talked, but he was so pumped up. He had such a great experience on this Mountain Man trek, because here he was a Life Scout, really unsure whether or not he'd ever be able to make Eagle, and he had been put into a crew for this 6 days with boys who were mostly Eagle Scouts. And here he and his buddy, they were both Life Scouts, and he discovered that decisions that the group would have to make, or even individuals, that these Eagle Scouts were making decisions, and he said, I would make the decision myself in my own head first to see what would I do, and then I discovered that they would make the same decisions, and that was really, he didn't use the word reaffirming, but he says it really gave me confidence that I could make good decisions. And so that was just one example, but he came back from this 1 week at Philmont a changed boy, and he didn't, of course, go on to become an Eagle Scout.
So, to structure a story like that, you look at a good movie or a good TV show, and there's always the structure of introduce the character, introduce the tension and the problem, and when does the problem get solved, and what's the result of the problem being solved. And if the story and we've all turned off movies or TV shows because we just can't follow it that well, So all of your stories should contain those elements, but it's gotta start with, first of all, we gotta know the kid's name. Because if it's a Life Scout, there's no, and we gotta get a picture of this kid. And this is where you get to fictionalize a little bit, because we are creating, I use the real name of this kid, because who's gonna know? Bill Barton. You're gonna say, I work with him. Yeah, he sucks at work too. Bill Barton. Now, if I'd done it, if I'd actually I just pulled that off the top of my head, but if I were to write that story out, I would describe him a little bit, because we have to feel these characters. There's this kid, Bill Barton was in my troop. He was one of the ones that are a little bit shorter and not as athletic as the rest of the kids, so he couldn't keep up. He had brown curly hair, and he was always a little bit rumpled, the kid that doesn't quite have the uniform. Then we're getting a picture of Bill Barton, right? And he had that whiny voice that sometimes bugs you. And it's like, Steve, can I be in your canoe? Now we know Bill, right? Now we're feeling it. So if Harvey, the Life Scout, goes along, then we know who this kid is. And you don't have, and this is the thing also, run your stories past friends, family, colleagues, and ask them one question. What about the story didn't you need to know? That's very important. Like when you said, he wasn't one of my kids, but he came along. Those are things we all throw in because it's a real story to us. And we want to get it accurate. What's important to the listener is not as important to us. So all you have to do is say, one kid came along, Harvey, tall, lanky, unsure of himself. And he's surrounded by all these Eagle Scouts. And I talked to his parents before we left, and they said, we're really worried about Harvey because he never speaks up, and he's not really vocal, and he doesn't seem to have any passion for anything. We learned that before the trip. And then the trip happens, and at the end, I talked to his parents at the airport, and boom. You see the flow? Because we can't go back and say, oh yeah, before he wasn't, because the flow is gone. Does that make sense? And this is where you do enlist the help of other people. Because I, as a professional entertainer and speaker, I'm asking colleagues all the time, what of this don't you need to know? And they have to be brutal and say, well, it doesn't matter that it happened on Tuesday. How often do we include Tuesday in a story? Why? Because it happened on Tuesday. How many of you have had this? My mom was great at this. So when your cousin was 14, she went to this one school. Or was she 15? I think she was, well, she had her braces when she was 13, and she already had her braces. Hon, how old was the girl? And I'm over here going, I don't care. Can we just finish dinner, please? So this is what makes a story listenable, is to have that flow, okay? This is something for you to work on, is to create that story. It has to happen to a kid with a name and a description, and at the end, what changed about that child's life? Because that brings us to step 7, which is a real hook. Wouldn't it be great if 100% of the kids we worked with felt that and got that? And I ask this all the time. Okay, you told the story about Harvey. Thanks for sharing. Do you know of any other organization where Harvey could have got that? No, there are some that are valuable, but there's something about scouting that offers just one thing that you cannot get anywhere else. And I don't care what it is. They're all valuable. They're not quite sufficient for what we're after. Wouldn't we like all kids to get that? And is there any place else they can? Well, the answer is no, they can't. That's another way of saying yes to your idea. And we're getting a lot of yeses. Would you like kids to have this? Yes. And you nod them into that yes. Let's see. Questions on the story that you're going to create. Any obstacles to creating it? Okay. And if you need to discuss this kind of stuff with me, go through the folks here. They have my contact information, or I'll just give you a card and email me. If you want to shoot me your introduction or your story or anything like that, I'd be happy to weigh in with any thoughts. But if you feel confident, run with it, but I'm here if you need it, okay?
Thank you.
Now, it says step 8. If the room is open and responsive and if the room is closed, basically you got to read the crowd. If you've got a room full of people that are all sitting like this, what I've done in a situation like that. No, sometimes it's just relax, you know. Never assume that this is always negative. This sometimes is, I got nothing else to do with my hands. Or I'm chilly, you know. This doesn't always mean closed off. I've made that mistake before. If you are at all unsure of the nature of the room you're going to go speak to, try to get an opinion leader. And you can tell who those are by people gathering, and people gather around those people and ask them their thoughts. They lead others' opinions. And if I saw people saying to you, hey, how you doing? And everybody knew you, I'd pull you aside beforehand and say, hi, I'm Stevie. I'm going to be talking to the group, and I'm going to need them to share some of their stories and whatever. Is it all right if I use you as a reference? You know, how long have you been in this? What do you think about this? And then I can say, well, Bob and I were talking earlier, and everybody in the room goes, he knows Bob. He's an okay guy. Okay, make sure Bob's a good guy. I've made that mistake. Bob sucks, now we hate you. But then you can add some problems. The 5 steps of persuasion start with a hook, which is usually a story. The second step is a problem. Because if we don't feel a problem in our lives, we don't take action. People do not move towards something good. If we just said how good scouting is, you don't get as good a response as if you say, here's what's bad about not having scouting. We move more quickly away from pain than we do toward pleasure. So the story has to lead to, all right, well, what kind of life do we want for our kids? Well, we've got that thing we want. Now, what's going to get in the way? And this is where you can do something a little interactive with your audience. Try to do something interactive at least once during a good presentation, because you folks discussing stuff on your own will make the point much more effectively than the speaker will. So if I say, now turn to the person next to you, and I want you to, and the reason I have people do it with themselves is that it's easier than doing it in front of the whole group. If you got a sense that the whole group is buddies and they will talk in front of each other, then do it as a whole group. But if there's any hesitancy, it's a lot easier for me to talk to you first, then report to the group what we've already talked about. There's less pressure there. But we talk about things like, what obstacles do you see that will get in the way of us having our children have the kind of adulthood we want them to have? So we ask things like, name 3 characteristics of a successful adult. And everybody could list those. Like, you could just call out one right now. What's one characteristic of a successful adult?
Confident.
Confident? What else?
Articulate.
Articulate? What else? One more.
Trustworthy.
Trustworthy?
Joy.
A sense of joy. Do you think scouting offers those?
Sure.
There's another yes. It really seems obvious to ask that, and some yeses are obvious. They're still effective, because they have to say yes repeatedly throughout your presentation, or you'll lose them at the end. Now, what will get in the way of an adult becoming confident? That's a thick question. What gets in the way of a joyful adult? What will happen that you don't have an articulate adult? Well, confidence. Not being able to handle failure gives you somebody as an adult that's not confident. And it's not being successful, it's not handling unsuccess. What does scouting teach you? That you're not always going to win, that you're going to have to deal with it anyway, and that you're responsible to other people along the way. Do you learn that other places? Sure. Not as well.
Failure is not bad. It's a learning experience.
Failure is part of it. That's why I like the movie Inside Out. Anybody seen it?
Yes.
Isn't that cool? You'll learn that sadness is not a bad thing. It's yin and yang. So this is why we've got step 8, addressing this kind of thing, is there's got to be a problem, there has to be an obstacle. The solution is scouting. You know, do you think scouting will help with these things? And you've got some stats here with the largest youth organization and all that kind of stuff. Now we've got the visualization part, which is a video, and that's provided for you. Any questions on so far what does a successful adult look like, obstacles to getting there, scouting being part of the solution? Do you see why we're folding that in? Okay. Now, we're really running out of time here, so we have brochures. Let's hand those out now. The video script there shows you what, you can just read that on your own. That'll show you what's going to play on the video. A video is important because it provides familiarity and support to what you say. And basically the 5 steps of persuasion, we've covered a few of them already. The hook is your story. The problem, you detail it. The solution is scouting. The 4th step of persuasion is the details. That's really the shortest part of the conversation. How and what and all that kind of stuff. The 5th is the most difficult for people, and that is the action. Most people end persuading people by saying, so think about and consider. Thinking about and considering things is not action. You see this in TV commercials. TV commercials used to say, next time you go to the doctor, think about blank. Now what do they say?
Ask your doctor.
Ask your doctor. Talk to your doctor. They actually say in many cases, pick up the phone, dial now. The more you can tell somebody a physical act to take, the calmer they are. They don't necessarily feel, if you do it right, they don't feel like they're being bullied or pushed around. They feel like, now I know what to do. And I've seen it done where somebody says, okay, so I want you to pick up your flyer right now. And people pick up your flyer. And I want you to fill in this, and I want you to fill in that. Now, of course, you can't tell them what to give. But
yes, you can.
Oh, yes, you can. Here's Guido. You're going to give more than what you got there. I've got a friend outside. He's going to review these. This is when you've got to make an action step. Pick up these. This is the pick up the phone, dial now part. This is what most people are uncomfortable with. Is it feels like they're ordering people around. You will actually make them feel calmer. Here's why. Have you ever left a meeting and at the end you said to yourself, there's an hour of my life I'll never get back? Here's why. You weren't told what to do. You were told what to think. And that's just too nebulous. So it's, here's what I want you to do right now. Pick these up. I want you to fill in this, 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 and this. We've got fill up the bucket here and all this, you know, the technical stuff, and check this and check that. And that tells them how to do this. All right? And the last part of this whole thing is how to end it. This is going to feel weird for most of us. Took me a while to get used to this. Never end with thank you. Why? There's zero impact with that. It's we've got nothing else to say. The greatest speakers and speeches in the world never ended with thank you. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Thank you. Wouldn't have worked, right? I have a dream didn't end with thank you. So you've got to have a statement. And we've got one here because it is helping your kids find true north. You know, it's basically please give generously so we can help our kids find their true north. Walk off. They will applaud because you're leaving. Not because you're leaving, yay, Bob's gone, but because you're done. And they know. And you've given them the one thing you want them to remember. Help our kids find true north should be the last words out of your mouth, because that has impact. And you don't diminish it. That's one thing I hate about all the presidential speeches. They always end with, God bless you and God bless America. Pretty much, it doesn't sound much anymore, does it? You really wish they'd just find something else to end with. But that seems to be the ending of the day. That feels weird to not say thank you. But if you know what your last word is going to be, find their true north, and then you leave, makes it easier.
But I do thank them. But I don't thank them when I'm doing the presentation. I walk off. When they turn this in.
Oh, that's when you thank them.
I
That's when
thank
it's
them.
conversation. Thank you so much. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. And it's got to come from the heart. I like what the actor George Burns quoted once. Great acting is all about honesty. Once you can fake that, you're good. Okay, we've covered a lot in the hour we've had together. questions, concerns, anything about this that doesn't feel comfortable for you or doesn't seem to fit?
For me, it's getting all that we talked about, that to be elements of our presentation, and getting that in 5 to 7 minutes.
Not easy. That's why the intro's got to clip along, have your story, basically ask a few questions, ask them to call out, like I said, what qualities of adulthood, that can happen in 10 seconds. What obstacles do you see them getting there? So they get a little worried about, because frankly, what people might say is, look at the state of the world today. That's what worries me about my child becoming a successful adult, and all this stuff out there.
Can I speak to that for
Yes,
just a
sir.
quick second? A lot of you don't know me, and the reason is, a long time ago, I threw out the district in my Family Friends of Scouting presentation. So when I was approached by the council, I asked, you got the wrong guy. Because they seem to have a good knack at packing a 10-minute message into 25 minutes. And that doesn't work well with the programming that people are trying to put out. So the reason I agreed to do this was this program, the direction we're headed, is the correct direction. I believe in this, and this is the right thing. So it's not going to be easy to go through those first pieces, and mine got cut apart a couple of times before we even got to this. But it's such a more effective way to do our business and get people out there to want to understand, to want to participate.
It's hard to pack it in. Yeah. That's why it's good to ask your friends, what don't you need to know about this story? I play an exercise very often in some of my trainings where I'll say, tell your friend something that happened to you that was like, oh, this one time I went to Target. Here's what happened to me at Target. And I'll say, you got 60 seconds. Tell your story, time it, done. Then we'll say, okay, tell the same story now, but you only have 30 seconds. So quickly think, what will I remove? Because I'm not going to talk faster. I'm going to remove something. And now you got 15 seconds. And what's surprising is when we ask the listeners, which version did you like the best? 60 second, 30, or 15? Almost everybody said the 30-second version. Because it's long enough to have the detail necessary to really live it. 15 is just too short, not enough living it. And 60 is like, I was there, I was at the end before you got there. So that's what can help, is play those games.
Just an observation, you're an excellent communicator. And the thing that's drawn me is you're looking at everybody and you feel like you're drawing us into you. So I think that's really important to have that communication. You're always looking at everybody.
And I keep something in mind, thank you for pointing that out. I do not use the phrase eye contact, because that could be something that what we in the business call the audience sweep. Just sweep the audience like this. It's very difficult to look at people who are disconnected, and we almost always look at the people nodding and smiling, and we exclude everybody else. They're already your friend, so you don't need to capture them. I try to remember what I call face contact, and that is I lock my face to yours and make sure that I get, and I stand pretty much where the two widest parts of the audience are at my 180 degree, right here. So I've got this right here, but I'll lock face at one point with everyone in the room. And if I don't do that, then I feel like I've left somebody out. So that helps a lot too.
You tend to move in sometimes too, when I would see that you would come in.
This
and
is
then-
what,
yeah.
yes. And you have to be careful about, this is called the power position in a room. I'm centered between the two widest people, and I'm in front. Every step back weakens you. Notice where I am now, and if I give the most powerful, persuasive presentation, it just doesn't feel right way back here. Also, to the side of center weakens you. Anytime I go to the side.
Okay.
Now you feel it? What usually gets the most powerful position in the room? Which sucks. So I try to outdo that. And if I'm forward of center, it can be intimate or it can be intimidation if I'm entering somebody's personal space. So I just make sure I stay at a good distance to capture people.
Well, it's also easy to figure out if you've hit that intimidation point, because people go like this.
Oh, they'll lean back. Yes, I've had that happen at a lot of parties.
Something that you're telling us here that I think is really key, and it plays into exactly what you said, is you do this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You have a certain amount of practice behind it, and what you're encouraging us to do is to prep and practice. Because if you prep and practice, then you're very comfortable with making that face contact. You're not. So yeah, I had this story about Billy. You're making contact with everybody because you're comfortable with it, and then you're genuine, and then that brings people with you as well. And that's another piece of this. It's very engaging. You're not. This isn't anything new to you, but you're excited about it, and you know it, so you can connect with it while you're doing it.
And believe me, I do this for a living, and if I've been away from it for even a couple of weeks, it's rusty. So no matter how long you've been doing it, you still have to keep at it, and there are ways you can practice. Any chance you get to get in front of even a small group for any length of time, take it. I've told people, if you attend a church or a synagogue or a mosque or anything like that, if there's announcements, volunteer to be the person to give the announcements. Standing up there for that brief amount of time is great practice. If you're out with friends and we're having drinks after work or something like that, I've had people practice by saying, hey, everybody, and I stand up and you don't, because that's uncomfortable, and that's what we're practicing. A toast to Andy, who finished the project 3 weeks early. Andy, even that gets you ready for the next time you need to do this. One other thing I do is an ongoing trick. You trick your brain into being ready for this. Every transactional relationship I have, I try to make it not transactional. Go to the bank, the grocery store, or Target, something like that. I'm just going to have a transaction. Then instead, I make it a conversation quickly. And it has to be genuine, based on what I observe at the moment. And I try to add humor as often as I can. I walked in here tonight, and the two ladies at the front, you were there.
Yes, I was.
I walked in and said, hi, I'm here to buy the Boy Scouts. You two are in charge. And they're great. They didn't skip a beat. One of them just grabbed the thing and said, put your credit card number in here, and you can buy it. She was quick. I'm hiring you. But I went to Target, and I'm standing there with my little pack of batteries is all I was buying. And I'm standing in the 12 items or less aisle where everybody has 30 items. And the young clerk was like, beep, beep. And she said to everybody, you want a bag? You want a bag? You want a bag? And I came up, handed her the batteries. Beep, you want a bag? I said, no, but I will need help out to the car. It short-circuited her brain. What? This is still cut out. But every time I go where it's going to be transactional, I change it. And it's not always funny. Sometimes I just say, hey, that's a really nice tie. Where'd you get that? Oh, my wife bought it. It just puts you in charge, and your brain is ready now for this. So that's how I constantly practice. It's an everyday thing. Plus, it makes life a lot more fun.
It's a salesman too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I used to do that kind of stuff with my sales guys. When I'm an engineering guy, you know, but my sales guys are all the type that they come in, they're fired up about something, tell them they got a nice tie, they'll tell you about that, forget what
Pointy?
it is.
Grab it. I'm sorry. Grab, are they supposed to grab something?
Yep, just grab one of each at the end of the table, the bucket and the packet, unless you have it already.
Got it.
One of these, and these. Sorry to interrupt,
Oh,
sir,
no worries.
but you're in engineering?
So, I'm in engineering, but my sales guys, they always get wound up about something and they're in your office. Oh, your guys aren't doing this. And my sales manager always thought he was a type A, he was a type B. And I'd look at him and say, it's a nice tie. Yeah, my wife gave this to me. I got it for Father's Day. And all of a sudden, 5 minutes later, he's like,
What did you do?
You did it again, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. My brother's a mechanical engineer. Oh, don't come to my house for Thanksgiving. I've stopped asking him how work is, because he'll tell you. You don't want to know from an engineer how work's going. So that's a very good point. This constant practice, it's very easy to do. Okay? Does anybody have any concerns about doing this, about standing in front of a group and actually making this happen?
I'm kind of a wallflower.
Oh, I could tell. I'm going to draw you out of your shell.
I find it interesting you can have such great success. You go to another one, and it's utter failure. It's very frustrating. You look in the audience, and it's like, who are you, and why are you here, and please leave.
Here's why that often happens, is a pre-formed presentation. And that will require the luck of the draw. And if you have a pre-formed, and this is what I'm going to say every time, get ready for failure. I'm very improvisational because that's my profession, but it's also because it's effective. And when I go do a presentation, none of my workshops look like the other. They're all different based on the group I've got. So that's where your higher intellect is going to come in, is to say, oh man, this group is really just quiet and withdrawn. Then you got to adjust to that, and you got to draw them out a little bit while respecting the fact that they're quiet and withdrawn, and you don't change that. You just flex with it. But if you have one presentation, the one size fits all does not work for persuasion. That's why there's that up and down, and that's why we're at Northern Star trying to make it an escalation thing instead of this. Because I'm only worried when I have a guy that a man or a woman that I'm coaching who says the phrase, I've always found it best when I do this. Get ready for failure. You've got to be ready for anything. Sir?
Could you circle back to your point earlier about they told me to say this? And if you get a presentation, if you get in and you get introduced, or the part of the program is we have to do our Family Friends of Scouting because we have to do our Family Friends of Scouting, not because we want to do our Friends of Scouting, those are units that are already shut down.
And I will have a conversation long before I'm going to speak to any group I find out. Like for instance, in my case, I do mainly professional skills training. So when I go to a workshop, it's to help people do something better. So I'll ask the person in charge, what do you want these people to do better when I'm done with them? And then I'll ask, why aren't they doing it already? Because that's what you're worried about. So if you're going to go talk to a unit leader or anybody like that, you got to call them aside and say, what's going on? What's going to be the biggest obstacle? Why? You got to help me here. We got to partner on this. And respect the obstacles and then remove them. So that's a very good point, is you got to be set up for success. I have been set up for failure so many times. I was doing as an entertainer, I do stand-up comedy as well as keynote speaking and training, and I was going to do a comedy show at a manufacturing facility in Marshall, Minnesota for farm implements. And it was, literally 2,000 guys and like one woman, all in their jumpsuits on lunchtime. And the guy gets up to introduce me like this. Okay, everybody, before the comedy starts, a couple of announcements. No holiday bonus this year. But today's lunch was free, so we hope you appreciate that. And this is word for word. And then, Marcy in accounting lost her battle with cancer yesterday, so we're going to miss her. Stevie Ray. That was the announcement. Hi, everyone. I followed the obituary and the no bonus money. So I talked to the guy afterwards. I said, look, you got to set me up for success. Can you make those announcements after I'm done? Because basically, you know what the audience is thinking? Well, why did you pay to have this guy come instead of us getting a bonus? Well, if they took my money and split it up, it'd be $1 each. Probably that's not, But you set yourself up because you don't want the opposite. That's a good point.
They'd be smiling, and they wouldn't be angry because they didn't get their money.
Exactly. Okay. If you want my card, ask for it. If you want to reach me through the folks here, go ahead and check with either of the two ladies. Otherwise, let's go do it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fun's over.